We know that SharePoint and Microsoft Office work well together, but are you aware of just how well they can work? You may or may not be. In Office 2013, along with SharePoint 2013, the integration has been optimized even more than it was back in 2010. There may be something that you need to do, though, to get the most out of the integration. You know that you can edit files from a library in their related Microsoft Office application. You know you can use a slide from a library in SharePoint and create a brand new presentation with it, or even add it to an already open one. There are a lot of things a lot of people do and have been doing for a long time. So what's new about this? Well, if you've ever tried to save to SharePoint, not having opened it already, or having started it from within the library, you know that sometimes finding the pathway to SharePoint can be difficult, maybe even challenging. Some might even call it daunting. That's because you've missed a small step that we now have in 2013 that can simply make this, well, a lot simpler. And we're always looking for ways to do things the easier way and not the hard way. We want to take just a moment now to show you what this little tiny step is that really can make your life a whole lot simpler. What we need to do is actually get SharePoint and Microsoft Office to talk to one another. And because of all of the new functionality and the cloud-based things that they have in 2013, this has become something that came to the forefront and has been made a lot easier. By connecting SharePoint libraries to Office, it provides the equivalent of mapping a network drive to your computer. It makes it easier to find and use when you want it, without having to remember all of those drives and folders and do all of that navigation that we used to have to do in order to work with SharePoint from within Office. The best news is it's really easy, so let's take a look at how we do it. First of all, we are talking about libraries, because libraries are the only things that can store content. And when we're working in Office, whether it's Word or Excel or PowerPoint, we're talking about saving a file. Therefore, it only makes sense for a library. We know that when we work in libraries, and we want to work with the library itself, not individual items, that we probably need to go to the Library tab. So we'll start by activating that. Here we see a few of the features that we've come to rely upon to make working with SharePoint easier. For example, we can create alerts, we can create RSS feeds, and these in some ways integrate with Office because they notify us in Outlook if Outlook happens to be our email client. If we look a little bit more to the right in the Connect and Export option, this is where we see the option that says Connect to Office. The tooltip explains it very well. Add to your shortcuts that appear when creating, opening, and saving documents in Microsoft Office applications. What could be easier? So we'll go ahead and give this a click or a tap. Now, I don't want you to wait here for too long and think something miraculous is going to happen. It doesn't. It actually has been enabled, and that's all we have to do. Well, that is, except wait. You should be aware that pretty much like everything else in SharePoint, how SharePoint is configured, what type of services you have, will determine how long you have to wait for this to take effect. It may be fairly instantaneous. If you're working on SharePoint that's hosted right inside your own organization, it should be pretty quick. But it may also take a while. In fact, especially if you're working with an Office 365 account, it can take several hours to appear. Where does it appear, and what exactly are we looking for? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at that. Fortunately, I have already done this for the SharePoint service overall, so we'll be able to see how it will look, even though it won't be for this particular library. In order to see it, we're just going to Alt-Tab over to PowerPoint, which happens to have a nice slide in it that also is going to help illustrate what we have done. When we link to Office, SharePoint, your Windows operating system, all kind of start working and collaborating together. I know, what a concept. What it does is it creates a folder called SharePoint Sites. It's going to be created on your local hard drive under the Users folder under your profile name. So we can see that this has been created under the Michael Brooks profile in the Users folder on the C drive. If we look down into the list of folders, we can also see a folder called SharePoint Sites. All of the different sites or libraries that we link will ultimately be listed here. We know, of course, that we do not want to have to go out and drill down to this folder that we probably don't use very much every time we want to save something, though. So let's take a look at where we find this within Office. And it's going to be the same in Word, Excel, or PowerPoint. Remember, this is a common feature that won't change regardless of what application you're using. If you've been working with a file and you're ready to save it, and you say, boy, I would like to save this to SharePoint, I wish I could remember the entire path of how to get to my SharePoint site and the library. Well, we can. We simply need to expose the backstage and do any one of the things that we normally do. For example, if we were going to do a save as, one of the options that will appear once this has been done is your SharePoint site should be listed as a drive. If you select your SharePoint site, you will ultimately see the recent folders that you've been using. And if that's not good enough, you can click on Browse. It will take you to that site, and then of course you can navigate down through it just like you always have. Ultimately, you'll find the library that you're looking for, and you'll save it just like you always have because we now know that libraries are just like folders. So we can save our documents to a document library just like we've been saving them to a hard drive or a network folder probably for the last 10 or 20 years. This is the easiest way to use it because it shows up in the backstage when you do save and save as and open and all of those other things as well. Remember though that it now is part of Windows. So you'll see that SharePoint Sites folder on the left-hand side of your navigation below where you see favorites and things like your desktop. So it's very easy to access anytime, almost from anywhere. Now, while we're here, it's okay to also notice that there's an entry for Michael Brooks SkyDrive. We do an entire video on SkyDrive, but know for now that this is also just another network location. SkyDrive is part of SharePoint 2013. So while the SharePoint drives, of course, are probably going to be for team sites where a lot of people have access, Michael can also save things to his own personal SharePoint space by using his SkyDrive. For more details about why you would want to do that and the benefits, watch the video on SkyDrive. This is a good place to stop part 1 of this topic, so we can pick up in part 2 with a little extra feature I want to show you that'll help tie SharePoint to Outlook.